mother, wife,
Air Force veteran,
gun rights advocate.
This is Stacy on the Right. Here's your host, Stacy Washington.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right here on SiriusXM's Patriot channel. Still live and direct to you from not the Heartland. We're actually in Washington, D.C. for the rest of the week. And we are welcoming back to the show Brendan Steinhauser, CEO of the Alliance for Secure Artificial Intelligence. Brendan, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me, Stacy.
All right. So we have President Trump and President Xi of China. They're meeting. They have been working on striking up the framework for a trade deal and other developments. Of course, China has their own aims in sight and they have their own priorities. Give us your analysis on the meeting.
Yeah, I think first it's important to remember the context of the meeting and the context of our relations with China. The Chinese Communist Party wants to dominate the world scene. They, by 2049, want to celebrate the 100-year anniversary of the communist takeover of China by being the dominant power. I don't think they've seen the likes of a president like President Trump in America in a very long time. They know that he is a strong president. They know that they are going to have to negotiate with him. He's coming from a position of strength. And so I think these talks are really important. They have to be viewed in that context. And this is all about whether the next, 50 years are going to be an American century or a Chinese century. And so a lot of issues are on the table, including trade, including technology, including agriculture. But I think that's the key context to keep in mind over the next few days.
So the key for all of these different developments is that while we consider China to be an ally in some aspects, they're our chief competitor, and they have a goal of eliminating American dominance around the globe by the year 2049. So all of their steps, whether they're trade deals, frameworks, negotiations, even AI security and any agreements that would be made there, all of those are done in the context of how they can eventually supplant the United States. Is that correct analysis?
That's exactly right. The Chinese believe that their civilization is an ancient culture, and it is. It has been around uninterrupted for quite a long time, and longer than any civilization really in world history. And they view specifically the communist takeover of China in 1949 as a seminal moment, as the beginning of the rise to their dominance. And so they are playing the long game. They think in terms of centuries, not years. They obviously have a person in power who's been in power for some time and plans to be in power probably for the rest of his life if he can do it in Xi Jinping. And so they're playing the long game. They want the Chinese style of government, of authoritarianism and control over populations to dominate the world. And that means not just in China and in Taiwan, of course, a country that they have their sights set on, but throughout the world, especially in places like Asia, Africa, and Latin America. And so there's a competition going on around the world as to whether the United States or China will lead the world, whether the American experiment is one that will be replicated, or the Chinese experiment in communism will be replicated. So that is sort of the context, that is the competition that we face. And again, I think President Trump is sort of in a unique position because certainly the Chinese can look at him and see that he'd be tougher on them than any president has ever been, frankly, in American history. Because I think he's coming in to try and achieve some trade deals, but also find other ways to make sure that America leads in the world, not the American experiment, and that the rest of the world follows.
So I guess the other part that really then comes at us it puts us in a stark relief is that President Trump is doing everything he can to equalize our footing and to put us back in the control seat on things like where our rare earth minerals come from, where our antibiotics are manufactured, a couple of really critical infrastructure type pieces, because it's not just the antibiotics, it's drug manufacturing in the critical areas that we've allowed to be placed in China for all of it, not just for some or for bulk, but for all of it. Like we're not producing any antibiotics here at home, not to a significant degree. And these are things that never should have been allowed to happen. And under previous presidents, it's like we're on autopilot. What do the Chinese want? Well, then we're going to do that. That's absolutely crazy to me that's where we are.
Yeah, I think you're right on that, and it goes back to obviously the Cold War and shortly after the communists took power in 1949, the American government tried to figure out the way forward, and of course, many years after that, President Nixon famously went to China, and he thought that if we could open them up, if we could talk to them, trade with them, kind of try and pit them against the Soviet Union, that perhaps we could become at least, if not friends or allies, at least become sort of partners in a way that would sort of keep the Soviets on their toes and on defense. And to some extent that was helpful, but I think what it did was we allowed the Chinese to take advantage of us for decades. They've been basically stealing our technology. They've been undermining us for decades. They've been, shipping their fentanyl into the United States, killing our people. They've been flooding the American academic system, higher education in particular, with propaganda and subterfuge, basically undermining American values. They are not our friends. They are not our allies. They are our adversaries. They're our rivals and our competitors for global dominance. And so I think you're absolutely right. We don't want to rely on them for critical materials, antibiotics, technology, semiconductors, all the things that we need to be self-reliant upon, or at least trade with our partners, trade with our allies and partners on. And so the president is looking to reduce the dominance of China and reduce our dependence on them. And I think that's a very important strategic play on our part. And frankly, I'm very pleased that this president has done something and that really no president has done before, and it's really putting America first when it comes to these critical materials, minerals, and technologies.
Critical minerals, critical technologies. I almost feel like we don't have a clear understanding on that. I'm not saying that Americans can't understand it. I'm saying that we've not taken the time to make sure that Americans are aware of just what the situation is with these very, very important items. So back to the artificial intelligence and the security there. What are the primary concerns for artificial intelligence and securing that? I know AI bragging rights are a thing, but I'm talking about the actual security issues.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think one of the most important aspects of this is that Taiwan manufactures most of the semiconductors that AI is built on. And so obviously the Chinese want to take over Taiwan. They've kind of stated their one China policy that, they believe that Taiwan should not exist as an independent country. So if we allow them to take over Taiwan, or if we are totally dependent on Taiwan for semiconductors, then we're not going to be able to guarantee that, America will lead when it comes to AI. And so it's a critical component that American companies need to have access to. And so I think the semiconductors are just right at the heart of this entire discussion. So we need to be onshoring semiconductor manufacturing. We need to make sure that we are self-reliant, and whatever, we think about the relationship between China and Taiwan, America cannot allow ourselves to basically be totally dependent on the foreign country for these chips. And the other thing we have to consider too, as it relates to AI, is we also cannot allow the Chinese to steal our technology. We cannot allow companies like NVIDIA to just send chips into China so that they become more powerful and they're able to develop advanced AI. So I think that chip export controls and making sure we're onshoring semiconductor chips are critical parts of the president's AI action plan, and really critical components of our national security.
They are. And then where do you fall on the data centers? I know that people are saying that you want to have, you want to advance artificial intelligence, so you need data centers, but it does feel as if we are um, kind of building out an ecosystem for something that Americans aren't using in the same at the same intensity as maybe the building of all of these AI data centers. Like they're building them up so we can use AI. Like I'm just still trying to figure out why we're seeing it this way. Like what's the big push to have so much new building on artificial intelligence data centers that is going to basically ratchet up the cost of the average American taxpayer's utility bills.
Yeah, that's a really good question. We can think about the data centers in this country as the place where advanced AI will be housed. This is where the actual AI will be housed, developed, and it's one of the leading companies. The CEO Dario Amodei has referred to these as geniuses in the data center. So it's essentially where the AI are stored and where they're housed. And so we need to build out that critical infrastructure in the United States. We want that to be here. We want to lead as it relates to AI development. But yes, there are valid concerns about where those data centers are located. What is the impact on our grid, on energy costs and water usage for regular Americans? In my home state of Texas, in my home county, there's talk of building a data center in this rural part of Texas where I grew up. And I understand those concerns. People are really rightfully asking questions about that because they've seen in other states and other places around the country where the data centers are built, they can use a lot of energy, a lot of water. There's some property rights considerations as well. And so we really have to get that right. We do have to build out the critical infrastructure to make sure that we lead on AI, but we also need to make sure that we're bringing power to the grid. And so I think we need to unleash American energy. We need to drill. We need to make sure we get nuclear power plants online. We really are going to need a lot more energy so that there's more supply. And if there's a lot more supply, then we won't see those price increases that everybody is worried about.
Yeah. And it's not just a worry. So on the one hand, I have it feels positive because we want more infrastructure and we want it to be based on the energy that we have that is easily accessible, plentiful, and matches our infrastructure. So yay, we'd love to see more infrastructure built for the kind of energy that we currently use. But on the other hand, wow, I mean, it feels a little bit like crazy pants that we would just like have a boom based solely on artificial intelligence. So, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk of this critical infrastructure build out. Could we be in an AI bubble? And I think that's a real possibility in the short term. There's billions of dollars, tens of billions of dollars moving between these different companies. And so a lot of people are worried that we could be seeing a bit of a bubble, kind of like the dot-com bust of the 90s, or if you think about the real estate bubbles that often emerge. I still think we're going to see AI develop and we're going to see advanced AI progress, even if we are in a bit of a bubble. I think we're sort of heading in the direction of this technology rapidly advancing. But there is a lot of speculation, and I think rightfully so, that we could be in a bit of a bubble. We don't want to create that situation. We don't want our economy to be so dependent on AI investments, and then all of a sudden we wake up one day and we have a crash. So that's one concern that we have. The other concern is just something that I'm working on here in Washington, D.C. with members of Congress, which is, okay, we want to lead in AI development, but how do we make sure that it works for human beings? How do we make sure that, we are able to control advanced AI, that we don't lose control of it? It doesn't turn into something that, that we lose control of, and then we have no ability to make it do what we want it to do. That could be leading to some very bad outcomes as well. So there's a lot of issues with this, and that's why we have to get this right. We have to be very thoughtful, very proactive when it comes to public policy to make sure we put safeguards in place so that, human beings control AI, not the other way around, and that we put Americans and America first, as opposed to our adversaries developing something and weaponizing it against us.
And we don't want anything weaponized against us. We want to be smart about this. Okay. Anything else that you feel like we need to tackle here, information wise or Should people be weighing in on this with their legislators and, kind of keeping in touch, or is it still too early, like for us to really form solid opinions on the direction here?
Yeah, I would really encourage people to read everything they can about AI and about what's here now, what's coming down the road soon. A lot of this stuff is pretty wild and it's rapidly advancing. So I would say read everything you can, talk to people, talk to friends and family about it. And I would encourage folks to go to our website at secureainow.org, secureainow.org. Read up on the work that we're doing, and we try and share helpful information about this AI revolution that is here, and it's going to impact all of our lives in a very real way very soon. But I definitely think, look, people should feel empowered, even if you're not confident in this or you don't feel like you're expert enough in this. Look, very few people are experts in this. That's not the point. The point is, as a citizen, you have the right to have an opinion about this because AI is going to impact your life. It's going to impact our economy, our national security, and you absolutely should be doing everything you can to learn about it and to communicate with lawmakers in Washington, D.C., and in state capitals around the country.
I love it. All right. So we're so grateful for your time. And I want to point everyone to the place where you can find out more about the Alliance for Secure AI. Go to secureainow.org, secureainow.org. Brendan Steinhauser, CEO, thank you for coming on.
Stay safe. Have a great night.
All right. Have a great evening.